Heyo everybody, Haku here with my review for Beastars Episode 3. So I just recorded my Episode 3 review for Boku no Hero Academia, and I'm really happy for that discussion. So I'm really hoping to keep it going with a good discussion on this one. I have tons and tons of notes, so this one will probably be a little on the longer side, but people for last video, I was so just very happy that I specifically got comments, multiple comments saying that they loved how in-depth the discussion was. So I'm really happy for that, because I mentioned it kind of, I'm not going to harp on this for too long, but I mentioned it briefly at the end of my Hero Academia video I just did, where I always find this struggle internally with, should I do a longer in-depth discussion, or do people not really want to watch a video that's basically as long as an episode itself? Or do I go shorter, but if I go for a shorter video, am I basically just recapping what happens and nobody really needs that? But yeah, either way, let's just talk about this for a bit. So either way, I think the big thing for this episode is a continuation of the same big points from the last review. It's just the nuance in Legoshi, Haru, and Lewis's characters, and how good that is. Other general thoughts I had were Legoshi being an amazingly cool main character, but in just a more realistic way. Like, we see all these main characters in anime and stuff that are like, I'll fight for the helpless and do all this good stuff, and look at what a hero I am. And it really works as a main character in fictional media, but it's not a fully realistic interpretation of a good person, or a cool person. But Legoshi is good in this sort of realistic way of just being like, yeah, I'm not perfect, but I do see that that person isn't perfect either, and they're doing their best. I do think that they're a good person, but I can't really judge too much either way. And I kind of like that, where Legoshi is really just sort of kind and good to Haru, but at the same time, it's not like this over the top, I'm going to save her sort of thing. He's just like, I'm sure she has her own circumstances, but she's probably a good person, and not that I have room to talk either way. So I think it's really cool. Some scenes I did particularly like too. There were actually a lot of them, but ones that stood out to me thinking back on the episode were the bench scene, where Legoshi's just sitting on the bench thinking about the interaction he just had and all, and the scene of Lewis on stage. Both of those were really good. Now, going back and rewatching, the talk between Lewis and Legoshi was very good. I just like the opening scene a lot. There was actually a ton that was really incredible this episode, that the first time I was watching I was like, wow, this show is amazing. I mentioned last episode it reaching the point where it was like the manga's my favorite manga ever, but the anime is really doing it justice and amazing on its own, and this episode, just incredible, just so good. So they didn't go that deep in this episode into what they call ecology time in the subtitles I had, at least, but I can get a bit more into that later. Specifically too, after I go through the episode and give my score and everything, I'll do like I did last time. I'll tell you, hey, that's it for the review, and if you want to stick around, there are some slight differences between the manga and anime that I can bring up that I thought were at least important enough to bring up, but if you don't care and you're an anime only watcher, then you can leave at that point. But what I just said so far were just some general thoughts. Now I'll go into talking about it a bit scene by scene. So we start off the episode with a Kibi flashback that I mentioned at the end of last week's review, in that section where I was like, oh, there was a scene they left out, so if you're an anime only and don't want to hear me talk about it, then you don't have to. But I think it adds more context to what happened. Now, in the manga, the Kibi flashback happens like right after Kibi's like, nope, and dips out of there and leaves Legoshi on the rooftop with Haru. So since they didn't show it, and since it really isn't that important of a scene, it just adds a little bit of context to, say, Mizuchi's boyfriend, or to sort of Haru's reputation and the reason Kibi ran out. Even though it adds some more nuance to that, I really didn't think they were going to show it, but though I wasn't expecting it, I very much appreciate it. Just the detail they're going into, to have all these small things that add nuance and explanation to what's going on, to make sure to include all of these, even though they're moving at such a quick pace, but to still have every little detail down so perfectly is just, it shows how much heart and effort and love and care that Studio Orange is putting into this, and I love it so much. Because just from a direction and writing standpoint, to include all these small details, even adding, like I said last review, some new details that I think add a lot to the series, is incredible. So not only are you catching the original story, but just the effort they're putting in with the animation, the soundtrack, all of it is very, very, very good. And I love that. And one of the biggest telling things for me is having a different ending for every episode. That's a lot of extra work that they didn't have to do whatsoever. But they're putting in a lot of extra work to do a different ending for every episode. So it's incredible just how much love and care and attention is being put into this show. And it's something you kind of rarely see. Because a lot of times you see some cut corners or some things where you're like, that was down to budget or whatever. But it's rare to see these shows pop up where you're like, man, they really put so much effort. Like the first season of One Punch Man's another good example. Or even another Studio Orange project, Hoseki no Kuni. Though I think you can feel it coming through in Beastars just from the 3 episodes I've seen so far. So much more even than it came through in Hoseki no Kuni. But like the first season of One Punch Man, where you could just feel how much care and attention the people that made it put into it, where they really cared about the show they were making, and that's what it feels like here. So yeah, I really appreciate having the Kibi flashback at the beginning. Sort of got a little bit off topic in a general sense for that one. But at this opening scene, I love Haru's inner monologue, the things that she's thinking, and the way we get to hear what she is thinking. But the interaction that we had felt very Hoseki no Kuni-like, just from the OST in the background, which seemed similar to the way that they spoke to each other, or the way that after Lugosi ran off and he left the scene, we lingered on the same scene with Haru thinking to herself and that panning camera shot of her as she went through her internal monologue. It all was very, very good, but also felt very, very Hoseki no Kuni-like in the way it was shot and directed. And I think that might be one of the best directed moments of the episode, but there's another moment that I think might even beat it out that a lot of you probably recognize what it's going to be already. But yeah, I thought that this interaction was very, very well done. I also love Lugosi's assessment of Haru when talking to Kibi just next up, where rather than focus on everybody's like, oh yeah, she sleeps around with a lot of guys, she's a slut, but Lugosi's like, I'm sure she has her problems, but she's a good girl, focusing on her love for her flowers and sort of the kindness that he saw from her before things, like he doesn't focus on the way she kind of got sexual with him, but rather than that, he focuses more on what he saw before that. Rather than just focusing on that one thing, he realizes she is part of this club all by herself, taking care of these flowers. She was so nice to me. Like, he sees more nuance than, like he says when sitting on the bench later on, there's more to people than just one thing. There's more to any of us than just one thing. So I like that a lot. From there, we get to see Gon, the principal of Cherryton, and they're presenting an award to the drama club. Lewis is the one accepting it, giving the speech, talks about coexistence and all that, and I'm pretty certain the award is heavily because of the way that there is coexistence among all these different species and these carnivores and herbivores within the drama club. So Lewis, again, is amazing on stage giving a speech, something that Lugosi takes note of. From there, I love this Kai and Lugosi scene. It was one of the most memorable to me because of Kai hyping me up, talking about all these characters in the drama club having hidden pasts, talking about Shiras, or the giraffe whose name I forget, or the rhino whose name I forget. So I'm hyped for that. I'm hyped for learning about their hidden pasts, and especially Lugosi thinking, even Lewis has a hidden past like that. So I love it. I'm excited for anime onlys especially I think a lot of people are like, screw being anime only, we're going to read the manga, because I've been getting that a lot in my comment section. But yeah, either way, I'm really excited for anime onlys to get to learn more about these characters' backstories and stuff. And a heavy theme of this episode and of the story so far in the first 3 episodes, there have been a lot of heavy themes, a lot of things that have been really, really important, like the sort of shades of gray, can't judge everybody by just one thing, the societal aspects with carnivores and herbivores that'll only get more complicated, more developed, and more fleshed out as we go along for a long time. But one big important part of the story has been Lewis's imperfection, how he comes off to all these other students as such a perfect sort of character, but at the end of the day, he's imperfect in a lot of ways. He sees himself as weak and trapped within this weak body, but he exudes this strength, this charisma that other people don't. And he tries his best to be strong and is upset at the limits placed on him by being an herbivore, and he doesn't want to be bound to those so-called limits and judged as an herbivore. Just like I talked about before, how Haru is bullied and ostracized because of sleeping around with people, but sleeping around with people is something that has sort of given her a leg up, so to speak, not trying to make a sexual pun, but a leg up, so to speak, when normally people just look down on her as this person who sleeps around, you know. So I actually like that we're seeing this nuance and these different aspects of the same character. Same thing with Lugosi, but we really, as good as Lugosi is, and as he is the main character, as good as all that is, we really haven't gotten that deep into Lugosi's character yet. We've seen him thinking of himself in different ways. We've seen him just generally being nothing but a good person, if coming off as a bit creepy or people being a bit scared of him just because of his physical appearance. But we haven't really gotten fully deeply into Lugosi's character yet, interesting enough. If anything, it's more been how Lugosi has been affecting Haru and Lewis's characters a little bit, and how Haru and Lewis are starting to affect Lugosi's character. We're just seeing things from a certain start point, but we're not developing how Lugosi feels sort of in a past tense sort of sense, like we did with Haru and Lewis, if that makes any sense. Let me try to organize that thought a bit better. Like, rather than Lewis, who we sort of get developed on what he's going through right now, and then we start to see how Lugosi is changing that, and Haru, who we see what she's going through right now, and we haven't seen too much of Lugosi having an effect on her, but we're assuming he's the main character, how Lugosi will sort of change different things in her life. We haven't really started from a point of seeing the conflict that Lugosi's going through and seeing how other people change him. Rather, we've just started straight from this is how he is, and this is how he's changing other people. His interaction with Els maybe changing her mind a bit about carnivores and stuff, and how she judged him ahead of time, but he wasn't like what she expected. We just sort of started at a start point with him without getting too much into his own personal struggles yet. We've got a little bit of it. We got some hints at some certain things, like when he's on the bench before talking about not really having experience with girls or this or that, not being able to judge her because he's struggling with his instincts. I guess him struggling with his instincts is kind of a big thing, but again, we haven't got super deep into any of that yet. So it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. But yeah, where was I? I was at, the story focusing a lot on Lewis's imperfection right now. So from there, we see that the newspaper club is going to be watching things closely. We have the small, tiny leader of them yelling at them and everything. And I like in the manga and everything they mention, as they're walking out, they're like, the leader was cute today. Did you see how adorable he was? It was just a little side comment that wasn't really so much in the anime. But also this girl with the camera, who's part of the journalism club, when I read the manga, it was a thing with me reading the manga where I was like, I have no idea what she is. And I was like, maybe she's like a kangaroo or like a wallaby or something. And here I am, watching this again in the anime, still no clue. Still, I'm like, I was watching this and I was like, oh yeah, this girl. I have no idea what she is. I do not know what sort of animal she is meant to be. So I thought that was something that was still funny to me. Still don't know what she is. Also, the animation, when it's kind of in 2D there for a bit, and she's talking to like the lizard iguana looking guy or whatever, it was weird. The animation reminded me so much of Hunter x Hunter. I don't know what it is. Like, was it a certain scene from the Chimera Ants arc that was very similarly shot? But just the way it was the sunset, the way the two of them were talking, the way her mouth was moving as like an animal mouth in the 2D animation, something about it, as soon as I saw it the first time, I was like, this looks like Hunter x Hunter. This looks like something I've seen before. I'm getting kind of deja vu-ish. And when I watched the episode a second time, I still got that same feeling. I was like, this looks so much like something that I can't put my finger on, and I'm almost entirely certain it's Hunter x Hunter. But yeah, it looks like something I've seen before. I'm almost entirely certain it's Hunter x Hunter and not the minx from One Piece. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain it's not the minx from One Piece because they're much more human-like. But it's something with the Chimera Ants, I think, that this just reminded me so much of. But there's a really, really great Lewis and Lugosi scene about how Lewis is thinking about how he can't escape his weak body. So he kind of flips on Lugosi a little bit for Lugosi just being this strong person, but he's not using that strength. And he's treating Lewis kind of weak, or at least Lewis is perceiving it as Lugosi treating him as somebody who's weak. And he takes it out on Lugosi that he's upset at his own situation, his own weak body that he feels like he can't escape. So I think that's really cool. And here's the part where I mentioned the cinematography, the directing, even better than that scene with Haru and Lugosi earlier. It was so good. Just the details of seeing... It's almost as if you could see what he was thinking just from the small expressions and the eyes following Lugosi's hands and everything. And Lugosi just getting to see the gestures he was making as he was speaking. And how, like... he wasn't being reserved or hiding his claws or anything. He was being assertive and using these big hand gestures as he was talking, because it was something like him using the lights and stuff is something like Lugosi's actually getting excited about and caring about. So I love that. And just the small sort of facial expressions where it seems like after Lewis lets Lugosi go and Lugosi saying, no, your strength is something that's important, it's righteous, but strength to me is a bit of a burden. It doesn't help me to be strong, being a big wolf and everything. So I love it. I love it so much. And it seems like with the micro facial expressions, what I was trying to get to, Lewis seems like he feels bad. Once he lets go of Lugosi and Lugosi says that stuff, Lewis realizes, I think, that he took out his anger on Lugosi. And you can kind of see this little teeny look of regret. And it's something that's so amazing where it always seems like 2D animation does emotion better than 3D animation. It always seems like that, but just these expressions, and they did a great job of it with Hoseki no Kuni too. The emotion on their faces comes through so well. And it's especially challenging given that they have these animal-like faces. They don't have very humanoid faces, and yet at the same time, despite not having very humanoid faces at all, in fact they're like way more toward the animal spectrum face-wise, as far as like furries go, so to speak. It's incredible how the emotion can come through. It's so good. So yeah, all of that scene was incredible. Ecology Day was cool, but very brief. They didn't explain it. They didn't spend too much time with it. But I'll explain it a bit more, because it is explained a bit more in the manga at the end of this video, if you stick around for that portion. I'll explain it a bit more. I just don't want to throw it in for people that don't want to hear about it. I don't want to throw it into this portion of the video. Just because, for all I know, it could be another situation where they throw in another scene, maybe an anime-only scene, to explain it in another episode or two. Though I doubt they would do something like that in this situation. I kind of felt like with this and them not explaining it, it was more of a situation of the anime just being like, this isn't critically important right now, and it's also, well, it's not critically important to what we're trying to do right now. And it's something that fans can gather just by watching it. They can watch it and be like, okay, this must be what this is, and just make the assumption. So they handled it very briefly, but it was a beautiful scene. I loved the OST, and Lugosi just realizing to himself where he's like, I'm not some monster hiding in the shadows. I'm not a monster. I'm a person, and I'm a male wolf, and I'm happy. and I love him just realizing these things about himself. Some of that is so good. And another thing with him saying, I'm happy at the end, or it seems like I've walked out into a place of light. I'm not sure if the lines are different than in the manga, or if they were just translated differently since this is a fan sub and everything. But in the manga, just a slight difference that doesn't really make any specific difference, but it makes sense with the context of the episode, which is why I'm bringing it up. In the manga, Lugosi thinks to himself, it feels as though there's wind between my legs, and then that's when he looks back and he looks and his tail is wagging and he says, oh, I'm happy. So he realizes from his tail wagging, he's like, oh, I'm happy, that's why. So I don't know if that's just a situation of them using a different line, or if it was just translated differently for the anime. But from there, sorry, I have tons of notes, so I have to keep glancing at them to see where in the bullet points I'm at. But I love that the story seems a lot like Lugosi is learning a lot more about himself as he interacts with Lewis, and Lewis is learning a lot more about himself as he interacts with Lugosi. And Haru's definitely a big part of this too, for Lugosi especially. But at the same time, it seems like what we've gotten so far is a lot of the two of them seeing each other, and through seeing what is going on in each other's lives, they sort of find out more about themselves. So it's really, really cool in that aspect. But Lewis's inner monologue as we go to the actual play scene is really great. I love it how he's just going through like, oh yes, our rehearsals was great, and then he thinks to himself, nah, not really, and he's saying, we all did our best and we all need to work together, and he's like, yes, work together for me and everything, and he has his own selfish motivations in this battle that he's fighting, while what he's saying outside of his head is just sort of pandering to everybody. So again, really, really cool. He makes it through the play before collapsing. All that was great, and I love the way his internal monologue at the end goes, where it goes to, the curtain's closing, I can't feel my foot, but I was able to make it, did you all see that, I did it, and he's like starting to get happy and stuff, and I love that. And at the end we see that he's collapsed. Also, Lugosi was watching all of this from what we saw from the spotlight, which is a cool detail, but I'm not going to get too deep into that, and we may get that next episode. But yeah, also I love the ending. We get a different ending for each episode, of course, and I've been doing a video on each ending, and I'm going to be doing a video on each ending. So because of that, because of doing a video on each ending, I'm not going to really talk about that too much or too in depth, because you can just go see my video on that. But yeah, some general thoughts again. The voice acting was incredible as always. The way it just sounds like they're actually people talking to each other and stuff is so good. And sort of just even the language they use, where it feels like the language in a lot of anime is very sort of like what you would read in a Japanese textbook. It feels very, I don't want to say very scripted, but the wording they use and their inflection is very different than if you're to, like, say, watch a Japanese YouTube video, and the way they're just sort of talking in a casual sense is more of what this feels like in Beastars. It just, the words they're using, the way they're saying them, it feels a lot more like that, a lot less like actual scripted work and more like just actual conversation, which is really, really cool. But I've already talked about that a bunch. But here, this episode, I mentioned last episode, the animation really stacking up to the voice acting. Not only did the animation stack up, it was great. It was so, so good. I think the best so far even. But the OST went off multiple times. The OST was good. I loved it. Also, the direction for this episode impressed me the most so far. The direction's generally been good. That's something that, again, with Hoseki no Kuni, the direction was amazing. And that's something that, again, the artistry just seeping through, coming through with Beastars here. So as for my score, the scores are just generally, it's just one man's opinion trying to put a number to things. So it's like, my scores don't really mean much of anything in the end. But I was like, maybe I should give it a 9.75. I was like, trying to think of reasons not to give this a perfect 10 out of 10. Because usually I'm like, I want something that hits me more emotionally, that's like, bigger and more grandiose in order to give it like a perfect score, but I was like, everything in this episode was so incredible, like all the little details of animation, voice acting, and everything. I was like trying to think of, is there any reason I shouldn't give it a perfect score? And I couldn't find any reason not to give it a perfect score, so I'm just giving it 10 out of 10. I'm just giving it 10 weak bodies out of 10. So yeah, now that I've gone through that, if you want to go ahead and opt out now, like, comment, subscribe, thank you, and all of that. But if you want to keep through to the end of the video, I'm going to talk about some things that aren't spoilery, of course, but are slight changes made from the anime to the manga that are slight changes, but I think are also important enough in delivering some different nuance to the scenes that I think are important enough to mention here. So I just wanted to give you an option to leave before I talk about that if you didn't care about that or didn't want to know about that as an anime only. But yeah. Now that I've given you that warning, thank you, like, comment, subscribe, and all that. But yeah, let's talk about this. So first off, in the manga, Lugosi was in the library researching herbivore/rabbit social customs. He basically, right after all the stuff with Haru, instead of being on the bench for that one scene where he's talking about his thoughts and all, he's like walking through the campus and everything, and eventually he goes to the library and he starts like Googling and looking up, is there any reason why she would have behaved like that? Is that some sort of rabbit social behavior, like he was thinking at the beginning of the episode we saw? And he's in the library when he gets called in for Territory Day, which is what they called Ecology Day in the manga translation I read when I was looking this up really quick. And they give an explanation when he goes to Ecology Day / Territory Day. They give an explanation in the manga that, like I said, they didn't include in the anime, but the explanation is that animals must spend they have like a certain allotted time. They have 1 hour, and every 2 days they have to use up their 1 hour to spend in a room that simulates their native environment to relieve their stress. If only we had that in real life. If only we had some stress relieving room I could go to. But yeah, every 2 days they have to spend 1 hour in one of those rooms. So, yeah, that's just an interesting thing, and we saw in the anime that, like, there was just this cover provided for zebras who, of course, would want to use that cover and herd together to hide from predators in the wild. Or we had this really humid room for some sort of lizard people, or this really cold room for those polar bears, and then the room for the wolves. And we have a little bit of Lugosi talking with 2 of the other wolves there, and there wasn't much of him talking with them in the manga either, but we do know that it was explained in the manga that they're wolf friends of his, because of course he has to spend 1 hour with a lot of them at least once every 2 days. But his room is just sort of an artificial moonlight room where all the wolves hang out together in a pack. So yeah, that was really cool. But it was something that was just handled briefly in the anime, I guess, because in reality it's not that important to the grand scheme of things. That's another thing, though, is the anime could throw in another scene to explain that at the beginning of next episode or something. I doubt they will, though. Then again, I doubted they would with the Kibi scene, but that was like an actual legit separate scene that was left out last episode. With this, it wasn't like a totally different scene or anything. It was just that when they do the Ecology Day in the manga, they explain it, whereas in this, they just have Lugosi do it, and they're just like, from showing you these different rooms, you can probably assume what it is, and you don't need to know the specifics of them having to spend 1 hour every 2 days. Another thing we learn in the manga, it's during Kai's discussion with Lugosi that's changed, is when he brings up everybody having their different pasts and everything, we have a chart up in the manga that, of course, we don't just get a chart on screen in the anime, talking about how the drama club has 33 members, and we actually get to see the different team divisions of that in the chart. And we also have a scene that they left out, or a little bit of nuance they left out, where when Kai is talking about, I wonder what your secret hidden past is, Lugosi flips off the light up there in the rafters with them and leans over Kai with really big eyes and says, a secret, yeah, I wonder what it could be. And Kai's like, seriously, stop it, don't make fun of me or screw with me like that. And tells Lugosi not to smile at him after pulling something stupid like that. So it's just Lugosi joking around with Kai was left out, which I think if that was added in, that would have been sort of just a cute little moment of levity. But yeah, that happens right before Lugosi thinks about, I wonder what Lewis's secret hidden past could be. Now... Okay, one last thing that was left out that might be another Kibi situation. It might be included in next week's. It wasn't an entire scene or anything, but when Lewis is walking through giving his internal monologue and his speech to the drama club before the show starts, during that time, Lugosi was was thinking, internally monologuing, that he could smell the ointment or poultice or whatever that Lewis put on his leg, so he could smell that there was something wrong with Lewis, and he could tell that Lewis was off in the way that he was talking. It was as if he was trying to hype himself up instead of trying to hype the drama club up. So we see that Lugosi notices something is wrong with Lewis in the manga, and of course this could be something we see next episode, where next episode we could just see the scene, the same scene again, but we could see it from Lugosi's point of view as kind of a flashback, where after Lugosi finds out about him collapsing and everything, Lugosi could flash back to that and be like, ah yes, I could tell that there was something wrong with him. I think we could see that next episode in that sort of situation, but we might not, because it's not really that big a detail, and like I said, it was within the same scene. It wasn't its own separate scene or anything. But yeah, that is it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to help support the channel, keep it going on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Haku of the Tubes, or link will be in the description, and of course any amount of course helps to keep the channel going. I cover the anime and manga and everything. And also another reason I bring it up is because I don't know what I'm doing with episode 4 yet, because I'm definitely going to be doing a review like this. I might also do a reaction, but then I feel like people are really appreciating these reviews. I feel like if I do a reaction, that would of course get a lot more views, but I'm like... And I would love to do it, to capture my reaction to my first time seeing some of these moments. But it's just something I'm not experienced with, something that I'm kind of nervous about, or self-conscious about, so I'm not sure, but if I do that, it'll be probably in an edited down version here on YouTube, and I would post the full thing on Patreon for patrons at maybe $5 and up. Because usually, like all the other reaction channels I watch and stuff, that kind of thing is usually at $10, but for me, I might be underselling myself, but I'm not sure it would be worth all that for me. But again, it wouldn't be behind a paywall. You would get, you could get the full version, as soon as I record it, pretty much, on Patreon. But I would still be posting the edited down version for free here on YouTube. And the review would be coming either way. So again, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. But if I do, I would really love to do one for episode 4, so you'd probably see it sometime later this week, along with the review. And episode 5 I'm not sure about, but depending on what their pacing is maybe episode 6, maybe so many other episodes, So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how or if I'm going to do any of that yet, but if I do, I'm just telling you how I think it'll go. But even if I don't do that, if you still want to help out and support the channel, that would still be super appreciated, obviously. But also just comment down there to tell me what you thought of this episode and what you thought of my thoughts on it and all that, because I really have enjoyed getting to hear from all of you and talking with all of you. Subscribe for more Beastars, both anime and manga. Of course, subscribing helps so you would know when I'm posting things, but also I try to be as spoiler free as possible in the thumbnails and in the titles for the manga videos. In addition to all of that, yeah, if you want to, you can follow on Twitter and I can talk to you there, keep you updated there and stuff for the channel. I post updates there. I post updates on the community tab here. And if you want to just talk to me and other people from around the channel on Discord, then the Discord server is free and open for anyone. All you have to do is ask and I'll give you a link to it. And I actually have separate channels there for the anime and the manga so that people don't have to worry about getting spoiled. But yeah, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.